We've now heard really quite an extraordinary representation on this aging populations, the demographic issue. We heard about it from a financial point of view, financial security, how we move into that phase in life. We heard about it from a work point of view. You know, John, you opened up where you challenged the very word crisis. I mean, this is not new. This is something we've known about, and yet, where is it on the public agenda? And where do we try to get to a place where, in the Foreign Policy Association, the World Leadership Council, we've had speakers and discussions the last day or so, or the next couple of days, on the environment, on major issues of fiscal and economic policy. This aging phenomenon is something that's been with us. We've known about it, and yet it's not on the public agenda. So I just find that very interesting and something that perhaps it is great that the FPA is doing that. So let's just get some, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Ed Cox. Picking up where you left off, sir, you began by talking about the need to restructure some of the social programs. And you say this has been coming for a long time, but somehow it's not on the agenda. And so I'm trying to reconcile that with what we just heard, because it seems to me that if more of the population is becoming older, there is going to be less political impetus for this to be on the agenda in terms of real entitlement reform. And so I'm wondering if I can get your reaction to that.
Well, I disagree. I think that we've just had a major effort to reform our healthcare system, pushing it in a direction of being more responsive to an older population as well as covering younger people. I think that all of the remarks today were about opening up possibilities for older workers and maybe taking down some of the barriers that currently exist there. We do face fiscal challenges, and I think every country will. But if we are smart about this, we will focus on keeping people productive, keeping economic growth robust, and that'll make the fiscal challenge a little easier to deal with.
Andy, did you?
No, I think I would echo much of what John said. I think we all, you know, we could have a separate session around why the political system is so poor at grappling with this particular set of issues, which, you know, have coalition aspects, which can be difficult, are out in the future, are not necessarily tangible and sort of here and now. I do think, you know, without restating John's point, that, you know, when you take some of the things that were just discussed, I think there are some opportunities to relieve some pressures around entitlement reform because of a willingness to reconsider work patterns that has not been fully in the policy debate in Washington. The Finance Committee did a hearing several months ago on the Senate side around unretirement and what would be the implications of unretirement on the Social Security system, which I think was a good beginning of a conversation around, you know, that topic and how it intersects with entitlement reform, but, you know, sort of a drop in the bucket in terms of the extent to which, you know, some of these themes need to meet the traditional actuarial calculations around the program, in my view.
Jeff, did you want to comment? Okay. Well, just, you know, excellent question. It is this set of issues under the aging topic are regarded as a third rail. You know, President Sarkozy attempts to raise the retirement age by 2 years, and everyone takes to the streets.
But he will get it done.
From 60 to 62.
Right. Exactly. And we haven't even covered some of the health issues. There was just a report that came out yesterday, Alzheimer's, which fortunately will explode as longevity continues. I think it's 1 in 2 people after 85 will have it. The numbers today, this new report just came out yesterday, indicate that it's 1% of global GDP, 604 billion, and it's exploding. So the issue is, how do we look at these items and do something about them today, invest in it today to make the changes so we can move for the future. Yes.
Cadet Pamela Baker, United States Military Academy. This isn't necessarily concerning that, sir. My question is concerning specifically people who have the economic ability to retire, and whether or not them staying in the workforce could have an adverse effect on our growing problem within the country of unemployment rates, and in the fact that we're reducing the amount of job openings that are present, especially if we move toward this corporate lattice idea.
Jeff, did you want to take it?
So, I spend most of my time looking at workforce and talent issues in organizations. And there's this very interesting disconnect, is not a good way to put it, but there is a disconnect between the unemployment challenge and the skilled talent challenge, right? And I would summarize it, I'm sort of writing something that we're working on, and we're calling it a sort of tale of two charts, okay? One chart is, imagine that you looked at the unemployment data for the last 10 years, and you looked at it, looked at the unemployment for people who have a bachelor's degree or more. It's never been more than 5%. It averages about 2.5%. Even during the height of the recession, it was in about a 4.5%. People with some college, about 8 or 9 or 10%. People with high school, about 12 or 14%. People without a completed high school, it's about 18 to 20%. Okay, incredibly consistent over the last 20, 30 years. So the skill shortage that companies are facing and organizations facing is for an increasingly educated workforce. So keeping educated people, again, so the question is, which people are we trying to keep in the workforce becomes the question, okay? Here's the other chart. In 1995, the United States, and I apologize for taking a United States view, but if you look at the percentage of people who graduated who are college graduates with tertiary degrees, 4-year degrees, the US was #1 in the world in 1995. We're now number 14. Right? So the race in terms of skill and workforces is about people with increasing amounts of education, right? And it's even affecting what has traditionally been called blue-collar work, right? And the example I'll give, and this is one that we hear about a lot, not just in the US, but globally, is there's huge interest in green-collar jobs and environmental jobs. The challenge with environmental jobs is they require people that have combinations often of technical skills, manufacturing skills, but also very high-end skills. Think about welders who can read complicated blueprints, right? Which is the skill set you need to produce a wind turbine, right? And so we have this new requirement in the economy, which is for, I don't know what you'd call it, people who have blue shirts with white collars. Right. I mean, it's this real hybrid, right? But regardless of what you do in America or in any country in the world, right, the focus on increasing education and the shortage will continue to be for people who have those skill sets.
Thanks,
so again, that's just part of that.
I can just be real quick. I don't think there's an economist today who would say having more people continuing working would mean fewer jobs for younger people. It doesn't work like that. It expands the total economy, drives consumer demand, and creates jobs, not shifts jobs.
And maybe just one last sentence on it. And to that regard, to John's point, it reminds me a lot of immigration as a topic of discussion. In that, there's going to be there will be in my view, a cadre that will try to drive some fear around older workers returning to the workplace, preventing opportunities among younger workers. But I think the economic evidence just will not bear it out. But in the policy debate, that's going to need to be a point of view that's put forth in a strong way.
Great. John, did you?
Don Van, your MC for today. This conversation sort of brings to mind for me Prince Charles' dilemma of waiting all of his life for his mother to get out of the way so he could be king. And now you're saying she can actually keep going and go on a lattice, and he can keep being a prince and not a king. You actually just answered part of my question, which is whether there would be opportunities. But I also want to look at kind of the public relations part of it, because there's the whole issue of seniority. in a company. And as a young person, I really just did want the old folks to retire. Unfortunately, ultimately they did. Now that I understand that experience is really an important thing, I like this idea of staying for a long time. But in fact, there are younger people who want the positions, they want the seniority, they want what comes with that. Seniority has always been correlated with age. Does that change in the system you're talking about?
Let me open by not answering you. John Beard, just about 18 months ago, was appointed director at the World Health Organization of Aging and Life Course. Now, we very consciously, and they very consciously, chose the word life course. And it's been alluded to already. Aging is in some ways about older people, but it's really about a whole new process of how we live our lives. And so the demographic shifts require a whole new approach to the sociology and culture of it. And not necessarily just about what are we going to do about someone who's 92.
Just, quick answer, because there's a number of questions and I don't want to go on too long. But I mean, one way to think about it, and I think that the potential for resentment and bad feeling that you highlighted is real. But I think we're going to look back at what the lattice produces in the return of older workers to the workforce. This will look a lot like, it will have as transformative an impact in workplaces as women entering the workforce in a significant way in the 1960s. And so I think to a certain extent, we need to think about what this conversation would have felt like there. And I don't like working with women. I resent that a woman is going to take my job. And we're, in most workplaces, we are so far beyond that. I think we're going to need to figure out how we as a society can kind of race down that learning curve a heck of a lot faster than what it's taken in terms of women in the workforce. But I think it's, if you look at it through that prism, I think that's the degree of social shift that we're talking about. And there will be challenges as well as, opportunities to accelerate.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left, so each of you make a comment, and then we'll go to one more question, and then we're done. Jeff.
So very briefly, I think that resentment in that sense of frustration is real. I think one trend that will help us with that is work has changed in a lot of ways over the last 20 or 30, 40 years. One way it's changed is the percentage of work that's done in almost every industry that's project-based versus being based in a bureaucracy is much, much higher. By one measure, 30, 40 times growth over the last 20 or 30 years of work is project-based. So what we're beginning to see is there are, a lot of opportunities for us to help move younger people into positions of authority and leadership, but also to keep people engaged who have experience, because so much of the work that we do is based on projects and based on teams and not based on those hierarchical structures. We're just figuring that out in large organizations.
I just want to say something to the cadets in the room, because obviously you live in a hierarchical structure, maybe the last one to change along these lines. But you should really be thinking about developing skills that would be useful to you outside the military when you are ready to leave, because you will need to have a second career or a third career. And so that's probably true for all of us. We shouldn't get so identified with the one thing we're doing now and assume that that goes on indefinitely. We need more flexibility in our own personal ideas about our future, as well as the lattice in corporations.
I think we have time for one more question.
Very, very quickly, I think one thing that has not been addressed here is that a redefinition of the word, what is a dependent? And legally, a dependent is a minor child or a spouse. But today, with the baby boomers taking care of parents, we have a huge 50% divorce rate. So you could have a sibling taking care of another sibling who is over a certain age. I think that this has to be readdressed, because by giving a tax deduction for a redefined dependent, puts money back into the consumer's hands to refuel the economy. If we have a deficit, savings, people don't have savings because they're spending everything and it goes back to what we talked about this morning. So, you know, John at AARP, could you lobby to redefine dependent?
Well, I think what you're talking about is not redefining, but finally getting the tax code to recognize the fact that it's a much bigger phenomenon. And it is. I mean, and it's going to grow. And so I think you make a good point.
I agree.
I guess one more question.
I was going to say that I think that the aging years, people tend to look up and they tend to look down, but they don't look at the reproductive years. And interestingly, I think women, of course, have children during certain years, but men want to be parents during certain years. And we all know the stories of men who missed raising their children because they were at the early stages of their career. And it's an interesting opportunity for groups who are particularly interested in or second careers to join with people or career the population age that would like to spend some years being a parent, and that by definition has to be younger.
Thank you. So
Gladys.
in, I would say at least 10 years ago, Kofi Annan said, quote, "The challenge before us now is to place global aging firmly on the development agenda for this century. There is no time to lose." This conversation made it clear that it needs to be on the developed country agenda as well. It's certainly a common topic. The data and the reality is here. And so again, I think on behalf of the panelists, we're delighted that the FPA and the World Leadership Council saw fit to put this topic on its agenda this year. And thank you all for your contributions and your attention.